my research focuses on understanding language development and language use, and I use math to do it. So let me talk a little bit more about how that works. Math in this case, the idea is that we use techniques that rely on math. We call these quantitative techniques. Quantitative is a fancy term for mathy, right? So techniques that rely on math are quantitative techniques, and one main part of pretty much any quantitative technique is literally counting things, just counting things up and tallying the counts of those things. And sometimes we count quite a lot of things, right? But we're at the heart of it somewhere counting things, right? Like that's one component. And another component is using principled reasoning based on those counts. So to be more specific, an example of this is something called Bayesian Inference, which allows you to infer a particular thing on the basis of counts, and it uses something called Bayesian probability to do that. But principled reasoning basically means implemented in math, right? So that's what makes it principled, is you can implement it in math. And so in this case, for Bayesian inference, you can determine, say, the probability of a particular generalization given some data you've seen, and that's proportional to a couple of other things that you can estimate. So the, say, probability of that generalization period, and maybe the probability of the data given that generalization. It's not important that we understand the specifics of these things right now, but it's just to show you that that's what I mean by principled reasoning. This thing is related to these two things by math. Another example of this is something called the tolerance and sufficiency principles, and there the sort of things you're doing are maybe more transparently related to counts. There's this kind of reasoning process where you're looking at the number of exceptions to a generalization you might be considering, and you're literally just counting like the number of items that obey the generalization you're interested in, and doing this kind of principled reasoning implemented with this math to determine if is that number, you know, are there more exceptions than that number? Are the number of exceptions less than or equal to that calculation, right? So these are examples, some examples, there are many more, of principled reasoning one can do on the basis of counts that you've gathered, counting whatever things you're counting. And so then we use these quantitative techniques, so counting things and principled reasoning, to help us understand how little humans develop their language knowledge, and how it is that adult humans, and hopefully machines, again, if we're interested in artificial intelligence, or for example, how they use language knowledge to communicate certain types of information. And the question really is, what do we count and reason over? How do we connect that information to language development and use? And that's what I want to talk about for the next couple of pieces of this talk.